punchy little tune. I like it still.
We're going to bring in our special guest today. We have Sam Ebersole with us. So welcome, Sam, to the show today. Hello, how are you doing?
Good. How are you guys?
Oh, we are doing well. So we wanted to give you a quick introduction.
Nice.
Sam has been part of our lives for quite a bit of time. I got to say, he was a professor to me when I had my undergrad at CSU Pueblo. I've learned a lot of it, and actually, a reason that you even have a compilation of what you're seeing today, as far as cameras and things, is in part to this man here. And we wanted to make sure that we could bring him on for a couple of reasons. Recently there was an opinion piece that was put into our Pueblo Chieftain newspaper regarding AI. There's some really good topics. We're going to jump into some questions about that. Sam is now a professor emeritus at CSU Pueblo, so still working with teaching, but has really been able to go and work on the things that he really enjoys in his life. And so we will put his website in there, Ebersole Media. He is running his own company, doing his projects. One of the latest projects he's been working on is more about the...
We'll tease it. Tease it.
Fair
Tease
enough.
it for the end.
Okay.
I want to tease
All right.
it.
There is a project we'll talk about, and it has to do with something
It's
you
fun.
can eat.
There's a project.
There's a project, of course.
So, Sam, we're going to jump into the show right off the bat. We want to start with that opinion piece because I think, in the spirit of what we've been talking about as far as AI is concerned, we've had our opinions, and I know you may not have watched some of our earlier shows. We tend to go down this philosophical rabbit hole. We start talking about, whoa, man, what happens when this happens? If AI goes too much further than we can keep up with it as humans. And reading through your article, you had some of those same kind of sentiments there. And so we wanted to kind of jump into that. And I know Ryan had a few initial questions that we were going to jump into it.
I mean, mostly, you should talk about your opinion piece, what's in it, and if anything, what has changed, because it came out, a couple months ago, 3 months ago. So we'll also put the link to it in the chat, in the Discord, in the show notes. But if you just want to talk about it a little bit, and then if any of your opinions have, evolved since then.
Well, that's the danger of talking about new technology, especially technology that's moving as quickly as this is. 3 months is a lifetime. It's multiple generations.
It's true.
So I don't know that anything has changed dramatically enough from what I wrote about, but I do know that the curve that this technology is on is so steep. Adam, did we talk about diffusion of innovation theory when you were a student with me? I don't know if we did, but so that's really about the adoption of technology, and people adopt at different rates. So you guys are on the cutting edge, bleeding edge of technology adoption, and then you have the early majority, then the late majority, then the laggards. I have, surprisingly, perhaps to some of you, I've been a little bit towards that late majority laggard in some areas because I'm always a little skeptical about the promises of technology. So I'm a little bit of a cynical, I try not to fall for techno-utopianism, and
Sure.
I think there's a lot of that going around. But so what has changed since the article came out? I don't know that anything really significant or major, but I will say this. You can go on YouTube and just type in the dangers of AI or whatever search term you want to, and you can find a million opinions. But the scary thing to me is there's a lot of heavy hitters that are raising the flag saying, hold on, wait a second. What it started out with 1,500 AI experts who signed the initial document. It's up. Well, now anyone can sign it, and there's 30-some thousand of them. But I don't know how many of those people are qualified to have an opinion. But some of anyone can have an opinion, right?
That's true.
There's the link. Anyway, yeah. So I'm interested in talking about technological determinism. I'm interested in talking about the ethical and moral questions around any new technology adoption. But I'll talk about whatever you guys want to talk about.
I think that's a great start. And
Totally.
so as a quick summary of the article, you kind of go into just a broader spectrum of AI. And you talk about how it can have some major effects if it goes kind of unchecked, and how, even these experts that you talked about don't know what's going on behind the scenes. It's learning at a rate that they have no clue as to how it's happening. And so as we start to talk about that, I think that's a lot different than the kind of media or the technology that we started to talk about. And so I always use this story of how long it took to adopt things. And I remember that kind of lecture that we went through, and how the radio, for example, took a certain amount of years, and then it started to get lower and lower and lower. And whereas like ChatGPT, for instance, it was like within months became one of the biggest adopted kind of technologies here. But it's something different. It's not. It has a different mind of its own, so to speak. It's not like a human necessary all behind it, knowing all the different parts and pieces that make it get there.
Yeah. So some people have been talking about AI as comparing it to Oppenheimer and nuclear bombs, right?
Yeah.
So he created a weapon, and then he had some misgivings. And what did he say? I've become the destroyer of worlds. He realized he had created something that was, you can't put the genie back in the bottle at that point, or Pandora back in her box, or whatever analogy you want to use. But I think it misses the point on one level, and that is when you create nuclear weaponry, then it becomes an arms race, and but still the president walks around with a briefcase that has the codes and the whatever in them, if he wanted to start a nuclear war. There is still some human control.
Right.
I see this more as gain of function research with a deadly virus. And, you're developing something that could be useful to mankind. Maybe this deadly virus that you're doing gain of function research in is actually going to be the cure for cancer. But no, if it leaks, if it gets out, if it gets out of control, it's not just that it's now out there wreaking havoc. It's self-replicating, right?
Right.
So AI, I think the greatest fear is, here's something that we're creating. We don't know what the potential is for harm, but here's the thing. If we recognize too late, that the genie is out of the bottle, it's in a position not just to do harm, but to continue to enhance its ability to do harm to us.
You're absolutely right. And it's funny, we talked about at the beginning of this that like 3 months is a long time, right? In between, when stuff comes out, and like how long is it going? So I feel like within the last 3 months, like we've had a little bit of, there's been legislation trying to, do things. There's been, the European Union has passed some stuff that is trying to like curb some of that. And, it probably hasn't gone as far as it should, but do you feel like, I don't know, Are we trying to get it under control? I feel like they didn't do anything about social media, right? Like we just sort of let Facebook do whatever it wanted to, but it feels like we have closed the gap a little bit on that, at least.
So social media is this huge experiment, and we're not going to know for years, if not decades, what price young people raised on social media are going to pay for that experience, right?
Right.
So, but I think there's enough people out there who have concerns, but it's still, there's no way to really control it at this point, I don't think. With AI, here's the problem. You have companies who have a private interest in maximizing the profit from this technology, but then you also have governments who don't want to curtail their own ability to manage and take advantage of this technology.
Or fall behind.
If China or the U.S. or the European Union decide, we've got to get this under control, and they put these really tough regulations in place, guess where all the development goes? It just goes to the places where
it is.
There's nothing that's going to localize this and say, if we can't do it here, we can't do it. No, they'll just simply take it to the third world country or developing world country or whatever, and it'll just, Silicon Valley will happen somewhere else.
Okay, you go ahead, because I could keep answering.
No,
you go.
I think you're hitting on this too, and I think too one of the things, and maybe Ryan and I kind of are embodying this in a way, is that you're absolutely right. I think there's going to be people, they're going to move to wherever it's going to be available, and there's always ways to kind of get to it through different VPNs or other ways that you might be able to leverage that technology. I know it shut down in a few countries for a while for reasons, and people were able to get around it. So I kind of embody this spirit of, I acknowledge that I know certain bad things are going to happen. So if I don't stay on the side of like knowing how it's going to work and being able to engage with it, then it at least gives me a fighting chance to kind of be that other balanced side to that. And so it's like there's things that have happened in society where you may not agree with it, but if you don't get on board with it, then you're never going to be able to kind of, fight that. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think there's some spectrums out there where people do think like, yeah, this is a bad thing, but let's maybe see how we can leverage it.
So that's where I want to. You respond to that, and then I'll go.
Well, I'm going to actually pose a question. So if you want to feed off of what he just said, go ahead, because I want to pose a question to you guys that will help us think about this idea of neutrality of technology.
Yeah, do that, and then we'll go back to it.
Okay, so let me ask you guys. I know this is a hot button issue, but how do you guys feel about gun control? So the kind of two sides are guns are in the wrong hands are deadly, in the right hands are a good thing. What stops a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. That's kind of the gun rights argument, right?
Sure.
Right.
So what do you feel about that? Are guns morally neutral, or does it only depend on who's holding it, or is there something about a gun itself? In particular, let's narrow it down. An assault rifle, whatever that means.
Totally. I am pro gun control, if that's what you're asking. 100%. I think like you have to put limitations on all of that kind of stuff, because if you don't, you end up with a society that just has like them flooded in the market, and people, just the percentages of people having accidents or getting freaked out or using that just go so much higher. And countries have figured that out, right?
So Jacques Ellul said that a knife can be used to cook in the hands of a chef, can be used to cure in the hands of the doctor, can be used to kill in the hands of a murderer. So that argument, and he wasn't arguing that position. He was just saying that's what a morally neutral or the technology does not come with embedded values. The neutrality of technology, that's the argument for it.
Right.
But he argued actually that all technology comes with embedded values.
Right.
So I guess my question is this: the people who say AI, we just need to make sure that good people have access to it and keep it out of the hands of the people who want to use it for nefarious purposes. That would imply that it is neutral, and it's really just up to us to make sure that people use it properly.
I see where you're headed with that.
You see where I'm going?
Because there is an inherent danger that's outside of the like, it's not a inanimate object that sits on there and then grabbed by any of those kind of scenarios you mentioned, is that it could be just doing something in and of it itself. It'd be like a gun that has its own mind in a way. And it could go around and, make its own decisions based off of how it's programmed or however that might look.
Or even if we don't grant it sentience, what if we just say the way that AI operates is it has embedded values in it. In other words, it's not morally neutral.
Right.
And unless humans bring ethical and moral decisions to it, it's going to go off on this probably amoral, unethical direction.
I think you brought up a really good topic that we probably scratched the surface on but never got to that depth. And this is why we want you here, to be able to open that up. And I just wanted to acknowledge we have a few folks in chat that have been asking some questions. We had Mike Azul. We also have our Talon in the chat as well. But one of the things is they were, and I think you answered this question, is that it is dangerous if not everyone would participate in kind of looking and curtailing it and putting these specific kind of rules or moral guidelines within in an AI. And so, to your point, I don't think that's stoppable, right? Like, the way there's so many AIs out there and people that are building it, you may have somebody that is putting good moral pieces into one, and others that are just gonna be like, screw that, I'm gonna just create one that's, as crazy and everything I want it to be.
Going back to the Oppenheimer thing, it's like, to create an atomic bomb or a nuclear bomb, you need so much, like, you need basically a nation's worth of, like, capital to put that together and to create nuclear states like that, but to have that kind of power and to like you could do that with sort of a very powerful AI, right? And so you could have that level of power, but it could be so democratized that a millionaire could have that, right? Have that sort of level of power done to them. And then you're like, man, there are so many, millionaires out there that could just have that, that you end up being like, hey, we have to put legit rules onto that. Part of saying, oh, go ahead. And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question.
Well, I'm not sure. Maybe your follow-up question might be better now. Go ahead. You go ahead with your question.
Well, so one of the things, because this is Adam and I always have these like rabbit hole discussions where we just go on forever. But like, so one thing that I wanted to do is bring up, your piece brings up a lot of the risks, right, of AI. Yep. Like if we don't have these safety precautions in place, if we don't have regulations in place, if we don't think about it in a moral safety thing. I also wanted to bring up, like, I was in that exact same boat, and I'm still mostly in that boat. I'm just kind of playing devil's advocate almost here. But like, there was an AI person. He's a VC venture capitalist or whatever, and invested and very interested in AI, called Mark Andreessen. And he wrote a blog post like maybe about a month ago about how AI is going to save the world, right? As opposed to kill the world, and, some of his points, maybe a little like Pollyanna-ish for me, but like one of them was that like, we talk about it in like, so here's a quote that I will say that it fits in the article. Every child will have an AI tutor that is infinitely patient, infinitely compassionate, infinitely knowledgeable, and helpful. The AI tutor will be at the child's side every step of their development, helping them maximize their potential, all of that. And part of that is helped me be a little bit more like, I would say hopeful about it, maybe, right? Like, and just in the way of like, man, if each one of us has more of that person in there who has our back and who is helping us in doing that, do we as a society like sort of be better and not use as much of that technology to be doing like the harmful and terrible and immoral things that we're doing right now, that like it could help us.
That might be the scariest concept we're going to hear tonight.
I love it. Okay, tell me about it.
So you know about this AI companion called Replica? Do you know about
yes,
that?
Yes.
Okay.
So, I mean, just for viewers, Replica is like basically an AI like girlfriend, boyfriend, or whatever you want to do, and you'll be able to have chat, and it develops over time.
Yeah, and this was initially built by someone whose partner passed away, and she took all of his text messages and all of that. That's kind of where it started. And then she found out she could really relate to this computer recreation of her companion. Anyway, on their website, they call it the AI companion who cares, okay? Always here to listen and talk, always on your side. That scares the whatever out of me.
Tell me why, because I have a counter thing.
And what you just described equally scares it out of me. And here's why. To remove the humanity from an interpersonal relationship and install an artificial computer constructed replica of that, to use its own word, replica, to me feels like a disaster waiting to happen. And here's let me see if I can articulate why. I think every time we try to short circuit the human connection piece of what it means to be human, we end up the losers. And I'll use an example of pornography. I think pornography is an artificial replacement for what should be human intimacy. And I think it leaves us not only wanting more and not being able to fulfill it, but I think it destroys us. I think it eats us up from the inside out. So that's just one example of it, and there might be people who totally disagree with that. But I think an artificial attempt to replace human interaction with something that is more caring, more attentive, less biased,
Sure.
All of those things that are not as human as a human being are doomed to ultimate failure.
Would you say that a video game is a alternative to adventure?
Yes.
And so would you say that like a video game keeps people from having adventures in real life, whereas an AI would also keep you from having, you know, relationships in real life?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to, but I think it certainly does. It's a substitute for.
And it would pull people potentially away from those if you have more meaningful things. And maybe we're at this weird point where AI does get to the point that it reaches some level of sentience. We're not getting to that point, but like there might be a point where we're having a debate if they're, you know, if it's a real thing, like if it's a person. But I don't want to get to that level there.
Because you're talking about Her, right? Like you're talking about the movie Her,
Yeah.
right? Which is like basically an AI, like sentient enough bot that can be a relationship for that. The only, and I'm like 90, or I'm 70% of the way there with you, Sam. My only thing is
this is going to be a 3-hour session.
Yeah, exactly.
30 minutes. Thing.
I know we're like getting up there. My only thing is like America has a loneliness epidemic, right? Of people being lonely. And like you can say that like the perfect world, right, is you going out and getting those human interactions and like having all of those awesome you know, like real life people in your life to do that. And like I'm also in agreement with that you should absolutely have that. But like if alongside of that you could also have a Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder who is being like, here's the right sort of like moral direction and is there to talk with you and be like, you know, sort of a little therapist and do that for you that people don't have right now.
Promise of social media was supposed to take us partway down.
That's true. That's true.
And it may be causing more insecurity and doubt and fear and self-harm and all
totally.
And to get into
that's the capitalism side of it too, though.
Well, and as we think about that too, I always think about it. And Sam, I know you and I, you invited me to a session. We talked about fake news, and I want to kind of take that because we're just inherently trusting that the AI is giving us the right kind of insights and things like that. And so.
Not this guy.
Yeah, I know I'm saying the same thing. I'm not thinking it is. And then and so maybe to transition the conversation, and this is again that philosophical rabbit hole we always get down, is that we have some opportunities to kind of think about this a little bit differently. So the fake news was my example, is that if it gets trained on the wrong kind of data and you get these hallucinations or these different kind of outputs to it, and then you start to trust that and you start to hear that often and often, and then like that becomes this other new alternate reality, and we're just living in these weird kind of pseudo worlds that are all super different based off of like our own likes and other things that other people are trying to push on us as well.
Okay, so fake news. So I don't know what your personal. I asked you already what you feel about gun control. Let's ask you about another hot issue. How do you feel about global climate change?
Dude, I am anti-global climate change. I definitely want to do as much sort of renewable resources and all of that we can.
Okay, so I've heard a couple of people on YouTube say that AI is a much graver threat than global climate change. Would you agree or disagree with it?
Totally. It absolutely could be 100%. If it wipes out, you know, all of humanity or whatever, and turns us all into paper clips. Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. so I'm going to give you a conspiracy theory that I just came up with today. Okay?
Nice.
So I went to one of these YouTube videos that the title of it is "Dissecting the Extinction Threat of AI."
Okay.
And somewhere in this video, I think they make a comparison to global climate change, right? Guess what? YouTube slaps a context warning message on it, directing people to more information about global climate change. What if AI is controlling the content moderation for YouTube and saying, "Oh no, don't look over there. Don't look at me. Remember, climate change is the real problem you need to worry about. Don't focus on AI. We're the good guys." You know.
I think you're hitting on where I was going with this, is that as it starts to think about those, it's like it's almost a self-protection mechanism, because you can see that things are changing. And one of the things that I had recently done is I'd worked with this gentleman that was I would like to say he's a genius, because the guy has almost like a photographic memory. He's done all this additional work in terms of stuff that I can't even mention. His PhD thesis, I can't even say the title. He has to dumb it down to me, but it's in terms of like physics and particle kind of splitting and things like that. But he also has a really good background and at least like a concept of how AI works and how it's like based off the training that you give it. So we talked about this a little earlier. It's not really sentient, and even the words or the letters AI aren't really indicative of what we're seeing right now. It's just really language learning models or image learning models, and so we're not at this point where it's actually has any decision making. And one of the like things that I thought was interesting is like if you had a bunch of cats and you said here's what cats look like, it would be able to go pick out those cats. But then you throw in like here's a cat-shaped glass or here's a cat-shaped pin, and now it doesn't know that what that is, and so you then have to go train it again. Oh, there could be things that are pins that look like cats, and that's where it's at. So we're talking about just layers and layers and layers of training, and at a certain point we just don't know what the heck it's doing behind the scenes after that. And so we're in this pickle right now where if we get to a point where it has an ability to like make decisions, or we've trained it in such a way like a drone to like take out enemy combatants, I mean, it's just going to be like
you know that armies around the world are developing that technology.
100%.
You know that's happening.
Oh yeah, if not already, like developed.
Yeah.
So let me go here, because like as we start to get towards the end of this, our interview section of this, Sam, is like as an educator, and let's maybe bring it back to some reality within the next months to the next 6 months as we start to think about some of these things. I know that I did some initial discussions at our local university about saying, what is AI? What's the impact to just education? And in your article, you mentioned how one of your students may have put in an AI article kind of paper. I just love to hear kind of some of your insights on that. And before I jump into like your response, I just want to give you kind of a heads up, as I at first was like, holy crap, you can put in like a sentence and you get this paper out. And quickly I learned like, oh man, it's like not very well written. It's very like surfacey, and that it's more of an assistant and it can give you some ideas, but you still have to have a brain to get in there. But what's your thoughts on where this is going now and where you could see it in the future?
Yeah, as a longtime educator, right? I mean,
yes. So depending on the type of writing, I think some of the stuff I've done this with prompts into ChatGPT and come out with product that was 95% usable.
Totally.
And that's generally for marketing or promotional kinds of copy or things like that. Those are the people who have to worry about their jobs. That's why the SAG and the TV writers are on strike, because their writing is not original stuff. It's not very deep. It's not, complex. I mean, I hate to say it, but there's a million stories out there and they all get retold over and over. Sure. And ChatGPT or other AI is going to be able to do that.
They can copy the hero's journey, right?
Yeah. I mean, 90% of that is going to go, over to AI. Okay. So they have a lot to worry about. But in an academic setting, so this student paper that was turned into me, I knew the content very well. I knew the documentary that they were writing about very well. So it was very clear to me very quickly that this was generated by ChatGPT. And that's fine, because I had explained to them what the downside was, so we had that conversation and it was a learning experience for all of us. That's fine. And that was the first time I, as an educator, had encountered it, because this is all relatively new.
Yeah.
And I really haven't been teaching since I retired, except for that one class. Okay. So here's the thing in education. Every time a new educational technology comes along, and when I was a kid, it was film strips in the classroom, or films, actually 16 millimeter films on a projector, being projected. Whatever the technology. Educational TV came along, Sesame Street and all that, made some incredible inroads. But what did it also do? It created couch potatoes. It created an obesity problem with kids who just become screen viewers instead of actively engaging with stuff. Then the internet and computers came along. Word processing. I got through grad school having to type all of my papers, including my grad thesis, on a typewriter. Now, what happens when you compose on a typewriter versus composing in a word processor? It's a different mental process. You have to know what you're going to say. If you get to page 18 and you decide you don't like the way it's going on page 2, you have to go in and retype all of those, all 16 pages, if you want to make a change. So you have to think more carefully. You have to be more intentional. You have to be more organized. It's just a different thought process. So
Sure.
you might say, okay, well, that's not the world we live in anymore. We need to train kids for the world they live in, and this is the world they live in. Okay, great. But I still think that those tools are crutches that are weakening. So it's just like if you put an exoskeleton on somebody and they walk around that way for a couple of months, their muscles are going to atrophy. They're going to get weaker. So that's what we're doing. I think we're slapping this exoskeleton on top, and we're saying it's giving us, just aiding us in certain ways. And I think some of that's true, but it's also creating deficiencies in the way that we process information and articulate how we think about it and develop conceptual responses to whatever the problem is.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
I have very mixed feelings.
Me too. Me too.
I think this is where we get, because it's like we
Totally.
just don't know where we're headed with things. And
Right.
and if I were to counter that as a debate, because I think about how much time it took you to type that effort, or how much time it may have taken to kind of conceive some art project in the past. And so you spent the time and the mental cycles to kind of get to a certain point. Are we just now on that other upswing on a curve where we're saying, now we don't have to worry about that processing. Now we can do bigger and better things because we have
more things, right? Like you could do
But here's
more.
the thing. I think that time was an important component. The time is what allowed you to think more deeply about
Right.
it. And what are you doing with the time that you're not spending now? You're scrolling on TikTok or whatever. You know what I'm saying? It's not like you're being more productive.
Sure. Well, like Adam and I couldn't do the show if I was typing out all my damn work on some freaking typewriter, right? I'd be home right now typing out that shit, as opposed to having this cool conversation with Sam Ebersole in this crazy studio. That's my only card. And I do think that there is a balance of that, right? Like you need to be able to spend deep thinking time doing things like that, right? That build
There's
towards
something
that.
to be said for efficiency, but you can't short circuit the
100%.
creative or the intellectual process that time requires to process things.
Like
I
our
will
brains
tell
need to be bored, right? And they need to have
Oh,
time to
yeah.
think about things, and they need to be, all of that, and a lot of that takes it away.
Bored is a huge problem.
Totally.
Huge problem.
Well, and I think you've hit on it. It's that we need that foundational bit, and so maybe part of the reason that even like Ryan and I is we grew up. I mean, I literally learned on a typewriter too, so
Totally.
I gotta throw that out there.
As a middle school,
Yeah.
I had a typewriter that I typed out things in middle school.
And
for
so
sure.
we've gone the mental journey. And so to your point, it's like we even with social media earlier, it's going to take, decades to kind of figure out the effects. And so with AI, we don't know, how long is it going to take before we start to see that? We're maybe long gone by that point, but at some point we start realizing, and I always think of the original Time Machine movie where it's like people forget that, how to just do normal things, because I don't know if you remember that point with I think it was the Morlocks or whatnot, is that in the future, everything was solved because technology fixed it. So everyone could just do whatever the heck they wanted to do. And in the chat, they talk about Wall-E, hover chairs. And,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much pieces there. Well, we're at a part of the show, Sam, where we wanted to make sure we got to this. Is there any last words, last insights, or last kind of things that you'd want to bring that you might just say at this point in time in regard to how your thoughts on AI?
Either in education or in, the multimedia and all of that kind of stuff that you're also into, which I feel like is a whole other side of AI that we haven't gotten into.
So part of my work is video, and so I use video editing tools that use artificial intelligence. I use a program called Descript for transcribing, but it also can take my voice and I can type in a sentence and it will construct the voiceover narration in my voice. So these are wonderful tools that simplify my life, and I'm not afraid to use them. But it's a very mild form of AI. It's not the existential threat AI
Sure.
that we're talking about for most of the program. But there are these little AI tools, and I find them very useful. So I don't want to turn my back on it. I think the big problem with the large language model AI that is potentially going to become more intelligent than we are as humans, is that it's not a technology problem, it's an ethics problem. And you say, well, we just need to program the ethics into it. Well, whose ethics are going to get programmed
Exactly.
into it?
Right.
You know, and I'm not sure that we would agree. And in the short term, I think, you know, the one thing that, okay, this is, I'll end on this because this is a negative, this is a downer, but
that's all right.
Okay, we had the 2016 election, and for years, people complained about it being influenced by Russian manipulation of social media. Then we had the 2020 election, and we continued to have debates about whether the election was legitimate or not because of COVID and all the things that changed in the election process. Now we're going to have an election in 2024, one of the most divided political environments that I think anyone can remember. And you know, coming out of it, that there is going to be huge, half the population is going to be convinced that something, and probably AI is going to take some of the blame, is responsible for how we got this outcome. And I think it's going to be chaotic, and there's going to be huge emotional turmoil. And if AI really does want to take over and kill off humans, that's all they have to do is create an existential threat that is so great that we kill ourselves to try to survive. So
was Trump created by AI?
I think it's possible.
I mean,
to destroy America?
Maybe this is actually what happened. AI was invented years ago, and that's a great way to kind of think about this. And so I think we still leave those questions of like where this is headed. And as we're gonna go through these weeks and months in the future, we're gonna reveal that, and hopefully we can kind of grasp some of this as we go forward, and we don't get distracted by the cool little things that help us in our daily lives.
I know, right? TikTok doesn't distract us from.
Well, I'm saying even the little mini AI versions that we have here. So, well, Sam, thank you.
And while we're being distracted, it just continues to collect data on us because we just like pour all this content into social media and onto the web.
You're like, what distracts humans really well? Oh, and now I know exactly what distracts them.
Talking about AI.
I need a board game. That's what I need.
Nice,
Heck yeah, you do. So Sam, thank you for the interview on that, and we appreciate the insights and where you're headed with that. I did want to
wait before we go. Do you have something? Do you want to talk about? I feel like we teased the project that you were going to talk about a little bit before I shut Adam up about it. And I think we need to talk about it a little bit.
We're going from an existential threat of technology to the most earthy thing I can think of, which is growing food, right?
Yes. It's a left turn, but I love it.
A project about Pueblo chilies or the Moscow variation of Pueblo chilies, the thing that makes southern Colorado proud of its chili crop and all of that. So yes, we're working on that with Justin Breger and Gerbco Productions. We're going to launch that project here pretty quickly and hopefully have a world premiere at either the State Fair next fall or the Chili Festival next fall. So
how could you not do the Chili Festival? I know,
it's got to be at the Chili Festival.
I mean,
right?
but State Fair has a lot of folks too. So I mean, that's awesome, Sam. I'm looking forward to seeing that, and maybe I can help you out with that, or Ryan and I.
Punchy little tune. I like it still.